Thank you for joining us again. Please note, this session is being recorded. Keep in mind to mute all background noise. Feel free to use the reactions feature. Engage with one another through chat box. Share your thoughts on social media using hashtag AAL Town Hall 2020. Now, President and CEO of the Chicago Community Trust, Dr. Helene Gayle.
Well, hi. I didn't know I was first up, but really wonderful to be able to greet all of you. And you know, as we've all kind of gotten used to this virtual world, it's never quite the same to do a gathering like this virtually as it is, you know, when we could be together and hug and, you know, really share together in a different and more personal way. But, you know, we just really so value the work of AAL. And, you know, particularly in these days, in this time when, you know, we are focusing on COVID and the impact that it is having on our communities, the racial reckoning that we are seeing as a result of the continued death and murder of Black people at the hands of the state. And, you know, I think all of these things have really, in some ways, made even more relevant the work that we do with you to really think about how do we really bring about the kind of systemic change that it's going to take to make a difference. So I'm just happy to be able to be with you as we together think about how do we do the most that we can do to really empower the communities that we work with, come up with the kinds of solutions that we know that can make a difference, that are both helping individuals but also changing and shifting systems. And how do we do that in the most intentional way as possible? So we look to you to be kind of our partners, our eyes and ears, people who will talk to us in as family, and help us to navigate as we think about how we can do our role better, as we've committed to this task of closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap, and really making sure that we do all that we can, so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're not still talking about these same issues in the way that we are, and that we have some tangible evidence that we can make a difference and we can create change. So, again, wish that we were all together, but it's wonderful to have this virtual town hall and have a chance to continue to share, grow, and create change together. So thank you so much. And I don't know where Cassandra went to, but I'm happy if anybody has any thoughts or questions you want to throw out. Saquon, you look like you're trying to say something, but you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you, Helena. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. I guess one of the questions I have is how you think the grantees and some of the groups that we're supporting can help the trust with its mission going forward. I mean, that's one of the things that we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the grantees that you're involved with, I think are kind of our eyes and ears into the community in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I really, hope that we will continue to build the kind of partnership where, we really want to be much better at listening and hearing and taking feedback, and, really having that kind of dialogue that allows us to make sure that we're really relevant to the needs of community. And I think we also want to make sure that we're helping to make sure that voices of the community are really put in positions of power, if you will. That not only us, but the people that we engage with are understanding in deeper ways, what is truly, we all sit and make policies and make RFPs and all the rest of it. Are any of those things, do they actually matter to people's everyday lives? And are we actually doing things that matter? So, I just see the grantees that you're involved in can be such an important part of, kind of making sure that what we do really, makes a difference for people's lives.
Yeah. Again, can you talk a little bit about this, the concept of resilience? And I'm thinking, when I think about you and I think about your work globally, and before you came to the trust, this question of resilience shows up differently, particularly in some of these third world countries and some of the places that you've worked, where you've worked. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that later. Can you say a little bit about what that means in a more global sense? This whole question of resilience.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a term that we use that Joe Biden now stole from us, but this notion of building back better. Yeah. How do you actually make sure that when you have something that strikes like a COVID, like a George Floyd, some of these things that kind of take could really tear at the roots of our being. How do you actually take those things and help communities not just to get to where they were before, but to actually be better than they were before? And I think it does, this term of resilience, people interpret a lot of different ways. It became very popular after Superstorm Sandy and, you know, natural catastrophes. But I think it's the same notion for human-made catastrophes,
Mm,
or, you know, something like what we're facing now, which is a biologic catastrophe. You know,
right.
how do you make sure that we aren't living so much on the edge that every time we get an assault, it takes us out? You
Yeah.
know, how do we build that, you know, that, you know, like, you know, I often say, you know, I remember the first time when I got a flat tire and I wasn't worried about whether or not I could pay for that tire. You know,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing you have to think
Yeah.
about. How do you make it such that everything that happens doesn't take you out? That you
Yeah.
actually have something there. There's a margin. You're not living on the edge. And how do we help communities not live on the edge? Because just making it isn't what we want people, isn't where we want people. We want people to be able to make it plus. And that, you know, if something happens, which, you know, COVID is just the first, and there will be others. You know, and we're seeing environmental, you know, everybody on the Louisiana coast, Texas, etc. You know, we know that we're going to continue to see these things that will impact people, and we don't want it to be the same story over and over again, that the same people who went into this insecure come out of it even more insecure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
In
Dr.
other words,
Gill.
she's telling me to shut up and move
No,
on.
no, no. I think we can pin this and we can like circle right back to it. But I want to make sure the chair of African American Legacy, Veronica, can go ahead and jump in. Thank you again, Dr. Gill.
No, no, good. And I gotta run to the next Zoom. You know, this is that world where you're Zoom to Zoom, back to back. But thank you all so much for all you're doing, and wonderful to see everybody. I look forward to the time when we can all actually see each other in a more people sort of way.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gale. We really appreciate your coming by to greet us this afternoon. And thank you all for being patient with me. As fate would have it, technical difficulties decided to say, no, Veronica, you're not starting on time today. So thank you all for that, and for Saquon jumping in, pitch hitting while I was getting my computer restarted. I also want to thank Coco Elise and Alexis Lambro for their wonderful performance this afternoon. That was absolutely fantastic, and thank them for that. And thank you all, each and every one of you, for joining us this afternoon. It is our hope that this afternoon session will be both informative, will be uplifting, and will provide you with much needed information as we are navigating some, as has been said many, many times, some unprecedented times, but together we will get through this. So we are hopeful that there's a lot of great gems and jewels that you'll be able to mine from the information that is shared on this afternoon. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon. Our guest speaker, our keynote speaker, is Ms. Jennifer Oldham. Since 2007, she has served as the communications director for the Healing Trust, which is a private foundation located in Nashville, Tennessee. During her tenure at the Trust, she has created a strategic communications plan. She has spearheaded a successful rebranding campaign. She has created an award-winning content. She has an internship opportunity, which is specifically for students of colors. She has managed portfolios for grantees and increased the foundation's social and print media presence. In addition to those many accomplishments, she can speak to the way that we can use our voices to represent the work that we do in the communities across Chicago and across the nation, to be very frank, because while she's in Nashville, much of the work that she does is very relevant to what we're doing here in Chicago. I think that it's important to note the valuable role that communication plays in the philanthropic sector. And I'm excited to get her insight this afternoon on how Black leaders, how we can continue to use our voice within our respective sectors to convey the work that we do, to convey our vision, and to be resources that are needed. by many of the nonprofits that we encounter and that we work with. So as a Black woman and as a communications professional in the philanthropic sector, she offers a very unique perspective. So please welcome Ms. Jennifer Oldry.
I had to unmute myself there. Hello, and thank you for such a warm introduction. It is an honor to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having me. In the spirit of authenticity, I'm going to give you a heads up that it is storming outside, so bear with my internet connection. And also, I am working from home with my husband and 2 children who are doing distance learning. So what this means is I might be interrupted because it's present and available as their father is. There are some things that my children look solely to me for, and I cannot control the weather. So thank you so much. I come to you as a person who has worked both in nonprofits and on the other side of that very complicated coin as a funder. I started off working with people in crisis to the point of exhaustion, which in a roundabout way led me to a place where I am now as the communications director at a foundation in the South. I've been in this particular foundation for 13 years, and during the majority of that time, I was the only Black person and the only person of color on staff, which means that, like a lot of Black people, I was pretty used to code switching and pretty good at leaving pieces of myself at home, despite calls by our leadership to bring our full selves to work. I say that I used to be good at code switching because, frankly, at this point, I'm all out of you-know-whats to give, and recognize that changing my language to be more palatable to white people is a form of self-silencing. As a Black person in America, there are already so many attempts to silence and ignore us, and I won't do the work of would-be oppressors and silence myself. My mom always says, we are healed in the sharing of our stories. While I believe that that is true, I also know firsthand that we often hide the parts of ourselves, the parts of our stories, especially in conversations with people that we do not think will understand. We do ourselves a disservice when we only tell part of our stories, when we try to frame ugly truths into pretty packages. As a funder who has read thousands of grant applications, I know that funders are really just people, and a lot of us are interested in hearing what is actually needed, rather than what can be regurgitated from keywords on our websites. I can tell you that our BS meters have gotten better, and we're giving a strong side eye to the organizations whose applications are full of words now, like anti-racism, justice, equality, and equity, when their org's demographics and programs reflect the exact opposite. We see through them, we see them. The best grantees, the ones that receive multiple years of funding, the ones whose expertise we seek, are always the ones who tell the truth. They're the ones who tell us when our grant process is confusing, who ask us if there's another way to do something, who keep us informed about changes in their organizations, even if things aren't going well. Funders are at some interesting crossroads. Some funders are content to continue doing business as usual, and some are full of well-meaning white people who want to make change but have no real idea what they're doing. That well-meaning group of confused people is your target audience. I'm going to go out on a small limb here and guess that a lot of you receive funding from organizations that issued statements following the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor that included a lot of words and almost no substance. They probably said things like, "We stand with you," and "We're against racism," and the most shocking phrase of all, Black Lives Matter. Remember when saying that was almost like calling somebody a slur? When it wasn't a cool slogan to include as a subject or a closing in an email? A lot of us had the shared experience of side-eyeing those senders of a lot of those emails because one, of our inherent suspicion, and two, the deep knowledge of who those organizations are, what they look like, and what they actually do. As a professional communicator and self-proclaimed word nerd, I know how much words matter. I know that there is a difference in the feelings and the imagery that are evoked when I say the word protest versus when I say the word riot. I know that under-resourced feels a lot differently than low income. The job of a professional communicator is to be clear, to connect, and to correct when needed. So is yours. I want to say a little bit more about correcting as it relates to clear communications. After the murder of George Floyd, some of our staff wanted us to issue an initial statement that spoke out against the notion of white supremacy and that generally explained our stance on what was happening in the world. As the communications director, drafting the statement would have fallen right in line with my job description. But this was the time that I couldn't and I wouldn't write that statement. I, like so many other Black people, was already traumatized by the knowledge that so many people of color were dying from COVID and could barely wrap my head and my heart around the fact that another Black man had been murdered by the police. I brought my full self to work and said as much to our staff, and they drafted a statement that I was willing to review. I reviewed the statement, and it was short and to the point, with one obvious correction needed. The statement referenced what happened to George, Ahmaud, and Breonna as deaths rather than as murders. The word death evokes an entirely different feeling and image than the word murder does. And frankly, murder was more accurate. As Iyanla always says, we have to call a thing a thing. Be honest with our words. The fact is that my role makes me the chief communicator, but it doesn't make me the only communicator. Communications is the job of every person in the organization. Good communications is simply telling the whole truth in a way that people can understand it. As leaders in your organizations, you might feel like you don't have time to do communications, but honestly, your organization and your communities can't afford for you to not do it. My understanding is that you all work with a variety of populations of people. And even though your processes and strategies differ, you're really focused on recognizing and supporting the humanity of the people you serve. And if part of what you do to keep the lights on and to serve the people that you are committed to is to talk to the media, to funders, and anyone else with a genuine interest in who you serve. Remember those funders that sent you statements about their commitments to justice and equity and equality? Hold them accountable to their words. Don't let them get away with giving lip service to justice while employing funding processes that make it difficult for grassroots and Black-led organizations to receive funding, while having one or no people of color on their staff. Ask them how they're demonstrating their stated commitments. And if you have the energy for it, make some recommendations. Your real job, despite what's in your job description, only includes 2 tasks. Your first task is to build relationships, and strong relationships are built on trust. There is no trust in any relationship without authenticity. Your story is more important than your job description. Other people can do your job, but no one else can see the world through your unique lens. No one else can tell the story the way you can. Your second task is to let them see you. Let the funders see you. Let your donors see you. Let your community see you. And yes, I realize that I'm asking you to do something that might feel uncomfortable or unrealistic, but do it anyway. Just about everything we're dealing with right now is uncomfortable and surreal. Being visible is hard, but you can do hard things. And your invisibility does not serve you or the people that you serve. I'll leave you with the words of one of my favorite authors, Austin Channing Brown. If you haven't already read it, I highly recommend her book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. Here's what she has to say. We must remind ourselves and one another that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, arming ourselves against the ultimate message of whiteness, that we are inferior. We must stare at ourselves in the mirror and repeat that we too are fully capable, immensely talented, and uniquely gifted. We are not tokens. We are valuable in the fullness of our humanity. We are not perfect, but we are here, able to contribute something special, beautiful, lasting to the companies and the ministries to which we belong. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now we're going to enter the Q&A session. Don't forget to put your questions in the chat box, and we have a couple questions that have already been sent over. The first one is, this is directed toward you. How can an executive director take the first step to be a more courageous storyteller or truth teller?
I think to a certain degree, you just have to jump in, right? Like you're a little bit more yourself every day until you're your whole self. And I think being in an ED position, especially, you model it for other people. And when people start to see you doing that on a more regular basis, then they start to feel that that is a safe space and that's a safe thing for them to do as well. I think inch by inch, practice makes perfect. And so you just keep doing it. You do a little bit at a time.
Thank you. We have another question from Jamie Fraser. The question is, what does it look like for community organizations to directly change funders to live out their commitments to racial justice through their funding without looking self-serving?
That's an interesting question. I don't always think it's bad to be self-serving, frankly. I mean, because there's a pretty good chance that whatever it is you need from a funder, another organization also does. So you could come as a representative of, yes, your organization, but also similar organizations for meeting a similar need or in a similar scenario. We've had grantees who have called us and said, okay, so we're trying to do fill in the blank, and you all are asking us to do this thing, and this is making it hard. And at one point in particular, we were really focused on outcomes. So one of the things that worked really well was to have them come to us and say, we can't meet these outcomes because this particular thing is in place, which they weren't necessarily calling us out. Well, they were, but they were calling us out in a roundabout way by saying, here's what you want us to do, and we want to do this, but here's what's keeping us from doing it. And in that way, it was a very easy way for us to see that, okay, yes, here's how we're contributing to that problem.
Thank you. We have another question that just came in. Do newsletters work, or is it phone calls, emails? What's the right tools?
Depends on the audience. Everything pretty much depends on the audience. We do phone calls. We also do newsletters. If you're talking about in terms of being a funder and receiving a newsletter, I will say that the phone call, I think, is more impactful, because then that way I can have a conversation with you and just, kind of get to know you in a different way than I'm going to be able to do in a newsletter. And oftentimes, which can be a strange dynamic, but oftentimes the people who are writing the newsletter are not the person that the organization has a relationship with. So there's a little bit of a disconnect.
Thank you. Still waiting for questions to come back in the chat. If anybody has any questions that they would like Jennifer to answer. We have some great comments in the chat room, by the way. Sorry, here we are. The comment in particular is, speaking as a Black man over 50, I find that I am particularly of no use the established opportunity status quo and their gatekeepers, white and brown. Is this because my over-the-hill demographic is of no value in a world I'm likely to occupy for only 30 years or so? Or is my perspective too sober and dire for those looking to have their status quo reinforced? This is from Andre Garner.
So I'm rereading that question so I can
Yes,
process it.
it's a little
I'm like, that is a meaty question. I don't think that your demographic is of no value to the world. So that's the first thing I would say. I think there is a unique perspective that you offer. And I think that just like, I do think our society kind of worships the young in a very strange and unrealistic way. But I think in the same way that if I have a glass in front of you and I can only see one side of the glass, the other people on the other side of the table can see something different. And so that perspective, I think, is valuable. And I would say kind of what I said earlier, don't silence yourself. Like, don't tell yourself no as a way of preventing other people from telling you no. I think your voice and your words still matter, and your experience still matters. You may have to assert yourself in a different way, but I think it's still relevant. Don't count yourself out.
Thank you. We have a question from Nicole Robinson, one of our board members. What is the role of the media in continuing to tell our story and use our voice?
Honestly, I think the media is a little less significant. Well, it depends on what you mean by our. So in terms of your organization, I think every organization at this point is kind of like their own little media organization. You have access to social media. You have a lot of the same tools. You can reach your audience directly. So in terms of sharing your words and sharing your brand and those things to the people around you, you can do that without the media. I think if we're talking about on a broader scale, I think at this point, we're at an interesting point where people are starting to see through a lot of the media's lies. I wouldn't be as reliant on the media, especially since a lot of newsrooms in particular are being cut and diminished. So I think it really is becoming more imperative that we tell our own stories just because there is no one else. But I think, I feel like the media, big media in general, is not really being trusted. So if you could get something out through them, I wonder that I'm concerned that the impact wouldn't be as great as it once would have been.
We have another question from Marquise Miller. What recommendations do you have for trustees who may guide white colleagues through the movement we are experiencing?
You broke up just a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry. What recommendations do you have for trustees who must guide white colleagues through the movement we are experiencing?
Oh gosh, that is hard. I would say, if at all possible, to outsource that particular work. It is very difficult to do that internally if you're the only or one of very few people of color. You end up becoming the point people by default. So if it's possible for them to connect to not necessarily white leaders, but leaders who aren't in your organization, to kind of have that real conversation with them, and to also tell them that it's inappropriate for the Black people and the people of color to become their only resource for their own learning, that is extremely helpful. I think the biggest thing to emphasize, one of the things that's most important to me, is that white colleagues have to do their own work. We are not their encyclopedia and their reference point for everything. It is not our job to educate them. And I think that once they learn and can understand that, sometimes they do the work themselves. But I really do think that Black people and people of color cannot take on the responsibility of having to educate the masses. That is not our job. We have enough job.
We're going to try to get to all the questions. If we can, we have a question from Raheem Cooper Thomas. What are common concepts or things present in funded RFPs in your experience?
Well, we're a health-focused funder. So there's usually some way that people are trying to frame health. I think one of the things that happens a lot, which is problematic, but I do understand why it happens, is that people use language and descriptions that make situations seem dire, that they describe people and situations and circumstances in negative ways. And I think what's actually happening is they're like, well, let me make it seem as, portray it as worse as I can, so possibly I'll get more funding. I think one of the reasons that is problematic is because you should not describe people by difficult circumstances. And rather than focusing on the solution that the organizations are providing, they often focus so much on a larger problem that sometimes it's counterproductive. Sometimes then the problem seems so big that we're like, well, even the amount that we have that we could give to it, will that even be helpful? So I think being more solutions focused and saying, here's what our organization can offer to address this particular problem in our area, would be a better way to go than what it is I'm currently saying a lot.
All right, but we only can take one more question. We're gonna take it from Catherine Jackson. How do you respond to young Black ladies in responding to trauma and their future? How do we find ways to measure our success or process regarding Black Lives Matter?
Okay, so the first question, the answer is always therapy. I am a big proponent of therapy. There's a fantastic website called, is it Black Girls Therapy? It's something to that effect, where you can find a therapist who is a person of color who can guide you. So I think in terms of responding to your trauma and your future, you have to address your own mental health needs, and it's not optional, it's required. It should be free at this point. I feel like that should be a part of reparations for Black people. We get free mental health care forever. Now, the second part of your question, how do we find ways to measure our success or process regarding Black Lives Matter? I honestly don't know. I think it just depends, because there's so many. Black Lives Matter as a movement is addressing a lot of different things. And I think we have to set those benchmarks internally and figure out, where we're trying to go and what timeline we're getting there. What's the increment for change? What's the timeline for change that we're trying to reach?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And we have additional questions, and we will get those to Jennifer so we can circle back to everyone with those answers. But now we are going to transition to Suzanne Griffith, who is the chair of the Grants Committee for African American Legacy.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Thanks for having us. I am here representing the vice chair and the entire committee of the African American Legacy Fund. I've been on the board of AAL for about 3 years and had the distinct pleasure of chairing this committee for 2 grant cycles now, I think. 2 or 3. And I'm here to say that we are very proud of the work that we've done in the last couple of years. For those of you who might be familiar with AAL grant making, you will recall that over the years they've made grants around a number of different themes and, supported collaborative grant making, where 3 or 4 organizations might have been a part of a very large investment. And in the last few years, as we, saw the lasting legacy of the 2008 recession, and frankly started discussing the fragility of the Black ecosystem, what we wanted to do was focus the grant making towards helping organizations build and find a level of resilience and to help strengthen the fabric of that part of Black life in Chicago. We are a very small funder, but what we have focused on is helping organizations get onto the radar of larger funders, because the credibility of getting a grant from AAL may signal that there's great work happening. And in doing that, I think continue to strengthen some very invisible parts of the Black nonprofit ecosystem, and in that way helping to create resiliency in these organizations. We did a survey at the beginning of the pandemic, and one of the things that we've learned is that very few of our Black organizations have any reserves, have the ability to plan for moments like this that you heard Dr. Gale reference, right? Knowing that when something happens, you don't have to fall off the edge, you can come back from that. And investments in AAL and continued investments in our grant making, we hope will eventually lead us to a place where we're able to support the Black infrastructure in that way. So we just closed our grant making cycle for this year, and we'll be announcing a new list of organizations in the coming months. And for those of you who have yet to receive a grant from AAL, or you might just be learning about us, we typically open that grant cycle in April. So look for that information. There's a website, you can sign up, and you'll be able to stay in touch with us when we announce our next grant cycle. And hopefully we'll get to hear from you in 2021. Did you want me to say anything else about our grant making?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Suzanne. You want to take it away, Brenda?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon. I'm Brenda Asari, President and CEO of the Alfred Group. And I see many of our friends and clients on the phone this afternoon, and I really appreciate you all taking time out to be a part of this conversation. Jennifer, thank you so much for your remarks. One of the things that we certainly know that this is a moment for Black-led organizations to maximize their collective action and to unashamedly ask for support. Again, one of the studies that I just read was one of the reasons that people don't give is because we're not asking. So this is our time. We know that many of our Black-led organizations are on the front line of fighting for the rights of Blacks and building systems that will be core to equitable recovery for our sector and for our community. The call to action is to move from the page to the pavement. And so we're going to spend some time doing that in a few minutes. But before we do, I'd like to turn it over to my partner, Sequane.
Thanks, Brenda. So there are a couple of themes that's running throughout this conference, and one is resilience, and the other is this question of renaissance. And for us, resilience, and Dr. Hell talked a little bit about this earlier, is to be able to maintain control of our situation, right? To be creative and find new ways of confronting challenges and leveraging our assets so that we're not just talking always deficits about, how bad things are and to engage in pathos, but to look at our strengths and to really tap into our aspirations. we also want to think about how we recover from these triple crises, right? Of COVID-19, a depression-like economy in the Black community, and structural racism, right? We want to build our community, in other words, in our own image and interest. And then it's this question of a renaissance, right? So for us, that means a revival or renewed interest in the idea of the best of what it means to be African-American and human in the world, right? In other words, what is our shared vision for ourselves? And how do we make it real? You know, how do we build and support the necessary institutions to bring that vision into being as we emerge from these crises? And then how do we close the racial wealth gap, which is the mission of the Chicago Community Trust? And so then the other thing that I think we have to talk about is the vitality of the Chicago nonprofit ecosystem, right? And so an ecosystem, as you all know, is a complete network or interconnected system. In Chicago's nonprofit ecosystem, and I've been all over the country and I've traveled around the world and looked at these things. Chicago has a really impressive nonprofit community and ecosystem. It's one of the most robust, diverse, and imaginative in the world. And that's because we've had to build this system out of this struggle, generations of struggle. And so, but to leverage that, I think we have to talk about strategic collaboration, right? So the challenge for us in closing is, you know, how do we build the strategic collaborations across a diverse value chain of public and private organizations for social impact? How do we do big things? So it's important that you know, what you all do, the grantees, that you do it very well with extraordinary discipline, that you stay in your lanes and work formally and informally with other organizations who share that same ethic, meaning that you do what you do, you don't get into mission creep, and that you become a really high performing organization over a period of time. And this is all in the service towards a big strategic objective, right? So for instance, creating peaceful neighborhoods on the west and south side of Chicago, or democratizing Chicago's economy for the benefit of all its people. So that's what we want to encourage you to do and to think about. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brenda to, unless you may have something else to say about that.
Thank you, Sequane. The only thing I want to do right now is the time for all of us to be actively engaged in this conversation. This town hall is not just about talking heads, but it's an opportunity for us to really learn from each other. And we know from many of you on the front lines, you know better than we do, because you're out there each and every day doing the work that you're doing to uplift our community and to deepen your impact and change lives. So what we're about to do now is to go into our breakout session. So we have 3 different rooms that we all will be assigned to. Each room will be moderated by a member of our board. And what we like to do is really like take this from talk into action and really come back together again at the end of 20 minutes to look at some of the strategies that we were able to formulate out of our breakout room discussion. So with that, we'll see you in about 20 minutes.
That we did see our grantees. I know we had been in the past, but I think there had been a few years in between. So hopefully this year we will continue in that.
Well, you know, I know a lot of organizations are really committed to helping our arts build back better and stronger. So hopefully that will be the case, you know, for your organization, for TAP. So again, if I have a way to put in a word, I certainly will. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So listen, Cardell and Charlique, so this is the way this is working. We have probably now about 18 minutes, and there are 2 questions that we need to answer. But before we get to the questions, we're going to have to assign one of you, and that's why I was hoping that we would have more people. But the way this is working, they're asking for the participants to report out in terms of our discussion. So would one of you volunteer to be our recorder and reporter for our question, which is around collaboration?
Sure, I can do it.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much, Charlene. So here's our question. The first question is this. We're in the midst of a movement for Black lives. How can can Black-led nonprofits leverage the open minds of large philanthropic funders to be heard now? How can Black-led nonprofits leverage the open minds of large philanthropic funders to be heard now?
Or how am I feeling about with what's going on around in the world?
Either or, just give
I'm
it to me.
feeling good. I'm feeling good. There is nothing that I can complain about.
Thank you. Who was that was speaking?
Raheem, describe.
Okay, Raheem. Well, why don't you go next? And I'm going to ask everyone because we have some questions that we need to discuss. So if people can be succinct and just name, sector, and one word, how are you feeling?
All right, my name is Raheem Cooper Thomas. I am the internal accountant at the Black Star Project, and I have to say that I'm feeling invigorated.
Love it. Who'd like to go next? John Lucas, you want to go next? I'll keep calling on people. I'll do it to you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is John Lucas. I am the president and CEO of a new nonprofit called Step Into the Light, where I provide educational and arts program resources to underserved and underprivileged youth, based out of Joliet, Illinois. And I am, right now I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm just trying to figure out where I stand, being that Joliet is on the outer, like the last outer outskirts of the Chicagoland area, and just trying to figure out how I fit and where I fit. And I just moved back from New York City to work in the community. And so I'm just trying to grab my bearings and figure it all out.
Thank you. Welcome, Mark. Mark or Deborah, can you guys go really quickly?
Yes, my name is Deborah Moore. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Strategy at NHS of Chicago, and I am working to close the racial wealth gap through homeownership, investment, equity. And I've been working on this for probably the last 10 years, and now I see it's more paramount than ever and really need to do something so that we share the same amenities that other neighborhoods do. And I think the guy is Malik, not Mark. That's why he didn't answer.
Oh, sorry
that's
about
what
that.
it is.
That's what
Sorry
it
about
was.
that.
Cool.
Deborah, what was the name of your organization? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
It's Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago.
Got it.
Hi, I'll go next. And apologies in advance. I actually have to step off for another meeting. Malik Henfield. I am, as of June 3rd, 1 year into my term as Dean of the School of Education at Loyola Chicago. I'm also Executive Director of a new Racial Justice Institute that will be announced early 2021 out of Loyola Chicago. Given those two titles and my 4 kids, I'm feeling very overwhelmed right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And great to meet everyone. I've got to head out.
I think Tyrone, did I miss anybody else? Because I do want to jump to the conversation. I just want us to know who is on this call.
Tools. I know you. Okay. Do you want to share a little bit more information, Soraya, about the tools that you were referencing?
Well, you know, when you are at the helm, it's very lonely, and you're always in you know, at first you don't know what you're doing.
Yes.
You don't know if there's an end game to this journey, hoping there is. But so there's this, every day you've got to chip away at the areas that are very important to you and to the organization. and it's like raising a child, but you got to, and you're wearing many hats. So really, I would pick up a phone call. I'll pick up my phone and I'll call someone within the group. And we use a particular method called clearing your space. Basically, we all wake up with a lot of morass in the morning. You know, you doubting yourself, you're doubting what you're doing. You're looking at leadership in the country that's at its core rotten, and you're looking for answers. And when I get to make that call, and I like have to literally have the conversation of, so this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm thinking about, and this is what's weighing me down. So I'd like to just say what it is so I can get it out of my space. And I trash it. And I keep and they'll say to me, anything else? And I'll say, nope, that's it. I need to call you back. And then I'll say, nope, that's it. And then, hold on, let me just hang up here. And then I'll say, okay, I think I'm clear. And then my day is amazing.
Wonderful.
And my day is like a knife through butter. But if I don't do that and I don't recognize I've got all this density going on, it will just run the day.
And so how do you guys, how would you recommend, and anyone can respond, how would you recommend reconciling those emotions and carrying that energy, and knowing that you have staff that's reporting to you? Right. And so we understand that the leader kind of sets the culture of the organization. And so can someone else maybe provide their perspective or strategy that they use, being able to reconcile that? So your staff is coming in, they're feeling some kind of way, and then you're internally maybe sharing same or different emotions, but you understand that as the leader, you know, you set the tone, you set the culture for the organization. So how do you reconcile that? Can someone?
Yes, what I do in the morning when we get our day started, you know, and in our meetings, for example, and we have to set the tone for whatever it is we're out to accomplish, I basically have every person there tell me, okay, so share what's going on. Share what are you dealing with? And whether it's personal or business related. And it's, again, it's putting it all out on the table. And to be authentic and to be honest and truthful so that it's out. And then if there's anything we have to address as a team or as me as the leader, I can take that on.
Especially, it kind of reminds me of the conversations we had right after the webinar. It was this great opportunity to kind of share resources, and I think this would take it to the next level. So it kind of adds an action behind AAL as well to use the cohort and connect with MacArthur and other funders. So I love this idea.
Yeah. Wonderful. Any other thoughts on how we can collaborate to advance the work and plans during this pandemic? Any other thoughts? Now, some of our people who have not had the chance to speak today, Jamie, I know you want to say something else, but wait, let me see. Let me see if anyone else wants to join in. We have Stacia and Stella and Marcus. Dorothy, do you all want to include anything as we're thinking about how we can collaborate? No? Okay. All right. Well, let me.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to add something. It's
yes,
not
please.
about collaboration yet. It's about like a movement. You talk about like, how can we keep this movement going and where can we be? So for me, what I'm thinking is, it's true, like right now we have a lot of people going out, like demonstration, doing stuff. I think we also need to teach our community to be engaged in civics, like civics engagement. Like, what do you think about, like locally first, like what in your, say in your city, what your mayor is doing? Do you know what is the program? How do you participate to be able to say, okay, this one is wrong,
there's a different levels of measurements of how we need to go about making that happen. And I get it, but understanding how I can start out to make sure that I can measure that level of success, or understanding how we gather the information to do an evaluation. Because I keep asking the question, and I get personally upset about it, but I keep asking the question, maybe because I don't understand. How do we go about as Black people so that white people do not tell our story, that we tell our story ourselves? You know, how do I become a Frederick Douglass so I can write it up? How do I become Ida B. Wells so I can write up the information? And so people would be able to understand, to articulate it in a way that that the white folks or people that have money are not in control about telling our story or writing our programs to a way. Because to increase, to decrease, to manage that the way it is, how do we be able to make that happen? And when I'm looking at the situation right now, I'm sure my time is up, and I'm looking at the situation right now with what's happened to our people, and they're dying and they're suffering, and Black Lives Matter and all that, and someone else is telling our story, but yet I'm working with our young people, and they are hurting, and we're asking them to be responsible in a way that we can't even be responsible or respond to our own needs, our own frustration, our own grief. All that stuff is happening, and I'm just really troubled by it, because I know that we ourselves are putting layers on what's happened in the last 7 and 8 months. And so it's like, well, how do we do that and still be accountable and still respond to the needs that we have right now? The program that we're doing, I'm on like a place now, like I need to find somebody to be able to provide some mental health issues, trauma, counseling for our young people before I can tell them about going out there looking for a job. I don't know about you, but back, if I was at their age, at that time, things that happened to me, I might be on cocaine or something. I might be really talking about, I'm about ready to lose my mind up in here, up in here. And I say that, and I'm at my age, but yet I'm got a little bit more going for me and trying not to lose my mind. But maybe somebody might say she's already lost her mind. I don't know. It all depends on how you look at it. So I think we really need to talk about it. We really need to talk about it. It's out here, and now I years from now, when we go back and look at why our babies can't learn, why our babies are killing each other, why our babies are out here, or even our seniors are losing it, because I'm not sure we know how to address it. Now I can talk about my God, but I don't know if everybody's talking about that same kind of stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, they're telling us to wrap up, so I think they're gonna cut us off.
I know.
Thank you, Catherine. I got it though. I heard you. I did. And then I'm gonna get you my email address so you can send you that too.
We have to determine who's going to report out, Saquon. Just don't forget.
I thought you were doing it.
Well, I'm facilitating the report out.
Oh, you're facilitating the report. Okay.
So for those who don't know, I'm Daniel Ash. I'm a member of the African American Legacy Board, and I also am a Associate VP at the Chicago Community Trust, and I'm very, very glad to see this great turnout for our town hall. My job now is to, simply put, facilitate the report out. So hopefully everyone, all of our moderators identified a reporter. And what we want to do is just go around the horn. My understanding is that we had 2 groups for each topic. And what I want to do is sort of cycle through the first 3 and then cycle through the next 3. So we have some diversity in theme. And then I think possibly we'll have time for some conversation, and most certainly I'll be trying to connect some dots as I hear the report out. So what I would like to do is begin with Brenda's group. Brenda, who was your facilitator?
Thank you, Daniel. My reporter is Charlique Roll, ED for Congo Square. So Charlique, take it away.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this amazing opportunity and just being a part of this conversation. Some of the things that we talked about in our group, really about collaboration and really capitalizing on the openness of funders during this time, we really thought about one, shifting perspective for the funders. First off, how do we capitalize on that openness? So tapping into their understanding of, we are not coming as a funder, we're not coming in to support your organization as somebody who's outreaching or speaking into and giving you the expertise, but shifting the narrative of us as Black leaders of these organizations as we are the experts, we are the community, we have the greatest pulse in the understanding of the community and understanding how to tap into the expertise that is available through the leadership of the organizations, not just because of leadership, but because of felt need and lived experience within the communities and understanding that. So being able to tap into that experience, shifting the perspective, and how we can understand, how we can work together as collaboratively as organizations to support the work of all of these Black organizations per sector, tapping into what is the engaging in partnerships. So really partnering with each other, one, utilizing these funders' resources to say, hey, one of the things that we really want to be able to do is to educate our leaders, educate our communities, educate the infrastructure so that there is capacity built for the long-term sustainability. So more than just, hey, here's what we need from you, or like, here's how we can help you, but help us to educate us. Brenda would always say, you teach the man to fish and he will be able to eat for a lifetime. So really taking those opportunities to say, we're going to teach this collective or this consortium of people the education, the skills needed to either, write successful grants, to be able to create compelling narratives, to be able to not just, we know how to tell our stories, but again, when we look at the inequity of like looking at a white organization who creates a grant that is a diversity and inclusion grant or an outreach grant versus a Black organization that's writing a grant that's saying, this is who we are and this is our heart, there's such a immense inequity in that just in general. So how can we break that down is by equipping our leaders, our Black organizations to do the work to write the same quality, and then using that consortium of the education hub to be the education givers that we are now working collaboratively to educate the community, educate our leaders, educate organizations to build sustainable organizations, to build sustainable practices where we can continue to grow and expand the funding, working together, also tapping into capitalizing and partnering with organizations. So again, right now we're in the midst of COVID, where there's a lot of things that are hitting Black organizations. So how do we tap into partnering with each other? Again, where we're not fighting for the same diversity dollars or the same minority dollars, but saying, how do we partner together to get the most bang for our buck, and also that will serve the community at a greater capacity.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Charlene.
Thank you, Brenda and Charlique. I just want to offer just a quick reflection on, Charlique, what your group sort of honed in on, this idea of teaching and educating philanthropy and others about sort of the work. An interesting development that I'm part of, and this is related to community organizing organizations in the city. They found themselves being requested or called on by philanthropy on philanthropy's terms to educate them about their work. And what happened, and this came from the community, is that they sort of shift the power dynamics and actually created their own space, called it a teach-in, and they opened the invitation up for philanthropy. And I highlight that to underscore this point. It's not our jobs to continually be responsive to philanthropy and come in and teach them what they probably should already know, particularly if they're in a particular space. So that's A. And then B, let's create the scenario where the community, particularly Black organizations, are setting the agenda. And so again, I just wanted to highlight that because it's very, very much aligned with what your group discussed. Now let's just shift to Nicole's group, which actually focused on self-advocacy. Nicole?
Hi, everyone. We were set up nicely with Jennifer's remarks around using your own voice and tapping into that and not self-silencing. And we had a great group. Raheem Cooper from Black Star Project, he raised his hand to be a little bit of a scribe, but also support the report out. And then Brian Smith kept us on time, so I want to acknowledge him as well. But Raheem, do you want to reflect a little bit? And if Raheem misses anything, then I invite other group members to just chime in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole, for that. The question in our group was, how do Black-led organizations communicate their needs, actions, or plans effectively when they're at the seat of the table? Am I right, Nicole?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So in other words, how do you size your organization's competitive advantage in order to get funding and build relationships? And I really did enjoy the conversation in our group. The first real theme that came out of it was to find a way to tell your story. I think is important. Where we left off with Jennifer was this idea about visibility. So being able to see the organization in a way that doesn't deal with one-on-one communication, and figuring out a way to find your story, find out who you are in the work your organization does, and how to communicate that is the biggest one. And also the idea of overcoming fear and anxiety. I think a lot of times having that conversation can be overwhelming, or it can feel as if maybe the organization or yourself is not worthy or not ready for this kind of relationship. And so being able to overcome your fear, overcome the anxiety of having a conversation like that is very important with finding your story. And the last point that came out about it, as far as how to build visibility, how to do things where you can communicate your organization's purpose and your organizational outcomes, is through action, grassroots action, the ability to get into the community, speak to the people who you are helping, and tell your story to the community, because what happens is the community begins to tell their story to you. And when you get to the conversation with the donor, or maybe someone who can build a relationship that could help the organization, you're not only coming with your organization story, you're coming with the community story, all the things that really resonate authentically with people, to build that relationship. So I was a scribe for the group, and that's where I got, but that's how we have that seat at the table. Or as John Lewis would say, you got to get into some of the good trouble. Just wanted to make that point.
Excellent, Raheem. Thanks so much for that. I do want to highlight one other thing that someone said about sometimes we don't know what the room or the table looks like. We've never seen it before. And how do we practice? How do we get to see what it looks like before we actually begin to use our voice? Like we don't have like a bridge to the table. And where does that come in? So I thought that was an interesting point too.
Indeed, it is. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Raheem. Let's just, in the spirit of time, we're going to keep this moving. And up next is Denitra's group, and they were the first breakout group, that focused on relationships that vibe, getting the energy you need to grow. So, Denitra. Or if Denitra's
muted. You're muted, Denitra.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. So we have about 5 minutes. We were in our breakout group. We lost track of time. So Kimberly, I'm just gonna shoot it right to you so you can just sum us up real quickly and share what we talked about.
Sure, and I'm gonna apologize in advance because my dogs are getting a little antsy and starting to bark. So, but we kind of touched on about 5 different things around sustaining or relationships to sustain our energy. And first we talked about, making sure you have kind of internal, what I call having a rabbi internally within your organization to help you navigate organizational culture and, just be an advocate for you and, making sure they have your back, getting you through, bureaucracy, red tape, that type of thing. And then externally, making sure you have your good set of girlfriends or guy friends who you can go to and talk to, who are in similar roles and can share, their experiences and help you vent, and be a thought partner for you. Secondly, we talked about utilizing life coaches and other type of leadership tools. Folks talked about Landmark and utilizing an exercise called clearing the space, where they, pull folks together and do, just to get rid of negative chatter and help folks kind of clear negative energy, to get them through their day. Third, just, as a leader, you set the tone. So, being authentic and trustful, and that leads to your, your subordinates or your other team members supporting you. Sorry guys for the dogs, but somebody just came on my porch. And, making sure that you give them space, to be heard and to be supported. Creating a space so that others can step into so that it's not all on the leader, right? So making sure that you give your team members the room to grow, because eventually, they're going to step into leadership positions themselves, if not yours at one time, but making sure they have that space and opportunity to grow. And then lastly, making sure you're engaging people that are smarter than you. So oftentimes, folks, or sometimes, folks surround themselves with yes people, and or people who are afraid to, tell them that, the emperor is not wearing any clothes or things like that. So those are kind of like the 5 areas that we really touched on in terms of, developing those relationships to sustain your energy. Denitra, did I miss anything?
No, you didn't. Thank you so much. And our group, it was an honor and a pleasure to have the discussion with you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Denitra. So as you guys know, we had 3 other breakout groups that covered the same topics. And so what I'm going to ask for those, the next round of reporters is to give us that one item that you have not heard stated already from the previous group. If there are 2 uniques, feel free to share 2. But we want to sort of make up some time here, and I don't want us to have to have a duplicate conversation. So what I'm going to do is work backwards, because I was in the relationship group that was moderated by Saquon, and I know Julian is going to report out. So Julian, if you could just sort of give us that one item that you didn't hear Denitra or Kimberly mention as they talked about their discussion. Julian?
Yeah, so relationships benefit from interest, understanding, and trust. And what should we ask of our donors to be in relationship with us? And one of the things that we said is, in Atlanta, they have this phrase where you start asking a friend, hey man, can you take me on a ride down? And they say less, say less. That's kind of their thing. You stop talking, man. I got you. And that's one of the things we were talking about in our group. We just wish that donors would tell us that sometimes as grantees. Hey, okay, man, you don't need to write me 17 pages. I mean, we understand the neighborhood. We understand the issues. We understand the problem. We know what's happening. I mean, which Black donor don't know what's happening on the south side of Chicago? Do I really need to send you 17 pages of stats for you to get it? It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time. If you trust me, send me the check. If you don't trust me, this is the other thing, do a site visit. I can't get people to come see my program. Show up, come and see it, and we figure that if you did a lot of that, more site visits, then you would tell me to say less. So that's one unique thing. I'll leave it there, sir.
Thank you so much for that, Julian. Let's quickly pivot to Troy. Troy's group focused on self-advocacy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to kick it over directly to Leslie Levy. She can, provide that for us.
Leslie?
Sorry, I was talking away to myself because I was still on mute. A couple things that we talked about that I haven't heard is we talked a lot about transparency and authenticity and the personal relationship that needs to be developed between ourselves and funders. We also talked about being very clear and talking about the impact that we have, sometimes using our stakeholders or participants' words as well as data to talk about why we have positive outcomes that are different than some of the other organizations. And it's really being based on the fact that we are from the communities that we serve and that we are connected to our constituents in a very different way. Therefore, our outcomes look different and we have different results, but also being comfortable enough to be transparent and talk about the flow of funding that has often not flowed to organizations that are led by African Americans and people of color, and really holding our funders accountable and talking about why that is so.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Troy. So I'm going to pivot now and bring in Veronica. And Veronica, your group, my understanding is focused on the collaboration questions.
Yes, we were. We were focused on collaboration, and our scribe was Cassie, and she'll provide a report out on what we discussed. There are two or three main items that have not been said that she'll go into a little bit.
One of the things that we discussed right at the top of the conversation was solidarity. So instead of our organizations competing, instead we can work together as Black serving organizations, pick a few big funders and do a pitch together. This is what we do individually, and this is what we do collectively, because the real root of everything we're doing is to uplift our community. And there is an obvious disconnect with larger funders and the actual things that need to get funded in the African American community. We also talked about, this is really key for probably a lot of people on the call, is that we really need to emphasize that the grant dollars going out, because there's a lot of grant dollars going out, especially for Black serving organizations, but how can they get access to it when they have problems like someone actually writing these grant proposals? So ways to collaborate is to build a cohort of Black grant consultants that can kind of help them get these proposals out the door to get as many grant dollars they can get during the pandemic. We also talked about possibly as for instance, AAL, if we wanted to focus more on building up cohorts, either grantees or outside of grantees, to make sure they're leveraging connections where we're giving them the tools they need to get additional funds. I think I get everything. Hope I did it fast enough and that was understandable.
Sounds very understandable. Thank you, Cassandra. I want to just end by making a statement in response to this question of like, what should we ask of our donors? And given that I now sort of sit on the grant side of the business, I think it's important, and I heard this in my group, that we ask our donors to become our fundraising partners. I feel strongly, and I say this to the grantees in my portfolio, that my responsibility is not just to adjudicate a single grant to you, but to make a commitment to help you raise the money that you need to fulfill your mission. And again, I think that's a power shift that we need to drive from the community level. And quite frankly, those of us that are sitting in philanthropy need to be receptive to that and quite frankly, amplify that message. So that said, I want to transfer back to Cassandra, I guess you to move to the next stage of the program. Thank you.
So, I'll just hop in here, and I'm gonna, help wrap things up and bring us to a close today. Just thank you, Daniel, and all the scribes for, those key insights from the breakout group discussions that we had today. For those of you who don't know, I am Troy Boyd. I'm the vice chair of the African American Legacy Board and the chief operating officer of Urban Prep Academies. I just want to start by saying that, I'm just blown away by the amazing discourse and the nuggets that were shared today. There was just really powerful words that, were received. And I just want to thank you all for coming out and joining us today for this virtual gathering. Thanks to Dr. Gail for stopping by. She can rest assured that we will continue to work until all of our people, make it plus. Jennifer Odom, your words today were just deeply transparent. They were personal, and we just thank you for being here today. You took us to church, and so many of the things you said, really resonated deeply with me, and I'm sure it resonated deeply with everyone else. Veronica, Daniel, Suzanne, Brenda, Andreessen, Saquon, Nicole, Denitra, and all the other African American Legacy Board members. As always, the time, energy, and effort you give and all that you do is why we're able to have successful events and success like the way that we experienced today. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Kimberly Rudd and her team for the dynamic planning of this event today. And finally, Cassandra, without your hard work, nothing that we do at the AAL would be possible. Everybody, please be on the lookout for a survey regarding today's town hall. Your feedback, will, be incredibly important and inform, the things like this that we do moving forward in the future. To conclude today's event, we'll have some words from Reverend Brian Smith of Chicago's Theological Seminary, followed by a performance from Maurice Fierce Jr., a 12-year-old drummer from Chicago's West Side with tremendous talent and potential. And there couldn't be a better way to end today's event because I know we all love some music and we all love the youth even more. So thank you very much. And I hope you all have a fantastic evening. Reverend Smith, take it away.
Thank you, African American Legacy staff and town hall friends. I'm a Baptist minister, but I want to caution you, I won't be long. So don't worry, I will go right through my. I want to thank you all. Just for the opportunity to come and to share with you. I'm very excited about what I'm seeing here. I serve as a pastor of a congregation on the North Shore, and I'm also director of advancement and strategic partnerships at the Chicago Theological Seminary, where I actually administer a grant supporting over 40 faith leaders based on the South Side of Chicago. I serve Black rabbis, imams, and pastors, and we're working very hard to try to respond to the issues in our communities. I've learned 3 basic things from my work, and I want to share them with you. 3 things that I've learned in sharing and working with these faith leaders. Stay networked, celebrate your gifts, and recognize your power. Heard many themes today, and I've been blessed by hearing some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today. I shared with my congregation as we entered into the COVID-19 stage and we realized that we would no longer have face-to-face services. But I shared a scripture with them which says, forsake not the assembly. And I share that with you all today. Stay networked, develop a herd mentality. And I've also heard a comment today, and I want to emphasize that the challenges we face require collaboration, not competition. So find ways that you can connect with other organizations and connect with folks to be able to do the good work in your respective communities. Number 2, celebrate your gifts. Don't apologize for what you've been given. You've been given those gifts for a reason. You are a blessing. And everything on this planet and in this universe is built for a unique purpose. And all gifts that we have are designed for the good of the world. So celebrate what you have and share it with the world. Do not apologize for being you. Number 3, recognize your power. I thank Jennifer Oldham. I almost called her Reverend because she inspired me by sharing how she refused to assimilate and she was comfortable with being herself. I want you all to be comfortable with who you are when you go to these foundations. Don't sacrifice who you are. Don't try to become something else just for a buck. We have enough people doing that already. We need you to be you. We're being bombarded with all kinds of negative information. Don't let this crisis defeat you. You are greater than this crisis. You have vision and you have a voice. Use it. That is all.
Hello guys, it's Maurice Fitz Jr. I'm glad that you guys have me here tonight. I hope you guys enjoy the music.
Thank you everyone for joining.
God bless you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
Hey, everyone. I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
Cassie.
Thank you all for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Reverend Brian. Thank you so much.
You all take care.
You too.
Brother Garner, I'm going to give you a call. I got your information.
Good deal. Talk to you.
Yeah, that was good, Brian. That was good.
Thank
you. Beautiful. Mm.
Hey, brother G. Sequan, good seeing you, man.
Good seeing you, beloved.
All right.
Staying out of trouble.
Trying to. Trying to.
Yeah. All right. Take care, bro.